What's going on, guys? My name is CJ Curry. This is Out of Bounds. Today's video, we're going to be talking about some of my favorite PrizePicks plays for NFL Week 17. It's the final week in the regular season, so we're going to hit the PrizePicks board. We're going to see what plays we're liking, which ones we're not, maybe some ones to target, maybe some guys to avoid. In case you're unfamiliar with PrizePicks, real simple concept. It's single player daily fantasy sports. Essentially, you select a player. PrizePicks provides a projection for that player, and all you have to do is select the over or under. Do you think that player will exceed the projected points, or do you think they'll go under the projected points? So you pick a couple of guys. You can go 2, 3, 4, or 5 picks, and then you can combine sports too. So if you're an NFL guy and an NBA guy, maybe you want to choose a couple of NFL plays and mix it with a couple of NBA plays. Maybe you like college basketball. Maybe you want to mix some college basketball with soccer. You can do that as well. They let you mix and match across sports however you like. So basically, once you make your selections, and you can choose if you want to do a power play, which is an all or nothing type of bet. So you can select 2, 3, or 4 picks on a power play, and if you get them all right, you win quite a bit of money. If you miss even just one, you lose everything. The safer option is what I like, which is a flex play. So you can choose anywhere from 2 to 5 players for a flex play. Flex plays allow you a little bit of room, margin for error, we'll say. So if you miss, one with a flex play, you don't lose it all. If you miss 2 with a flex play, sometimes you don't miss it all. So that's basically the gist of how it works, and I will walk you through some of my picks that I like this week for the NFL. So let's start digging in and seeing what we got here. So we'll go over to the PrizePicks board. We'll start with Stefan Diggs. He's going against Miami this weekend. They've got him projected for 19 fantasy points. As you know, Josh Allen, Stefan Diggs have just been completely on fire this season. I mean, there was a lot of question marks if that duo, that combination would work out. Question marks around Josh Allen. Is he an elite quarterback? Is Stefan Diggs going to just come right in and hit the ground running? I think that all of those questions can be put to bed at this point. I think we know that, hey, this looks good. This is going to work out, right? Josh Allen, Stefan Diggs, elite combination. So let's take a look at Diggs. We're going to be using Roto Grinders Lineup HQ today. I am not a Roto Grinders affiliate. I'm not a Roto Grinders partner. I do have access to their premium tools thanks to signing up through PrizePicks. Used PrizePicks promo code with Roto Grinders. Got me a few months free with Roto Grinders and their premium tools, including Lineup HQ. So that's what I have available. So that's what we'll be referencing today, and see if we can maybe find an edge here with their projections versus what PrizePicks is showing right now. So as you see, we are sorted by wide receiver. If we go down to Stefan Diggs, he's projected for 18.23 fantasy points. Now, the reason we're using DraftKings and their projections instead of FanDuel is PrizePicks, the way that their scoring system works, is just like DraftKings, except for one minor caveat, and that is milestone yardage bonuses. So if you look at quarterbacks, when they hit 300 passing yards on DraftKings, typically a quarterback will get a 3-point bonus. If a receiver or running back hits 100 rushing yards, 100 receiving yards, they get a 3-point bonus. Other than that 3-point bonus, from what I can tell, DraftKings and PrizePicks, the way that they score NFL football, is exactly the same. So we're gonna use them, and we're gonna keep in mind that on PrizePicks you will not get that 3-point bonus. So if you think Stefan Diggs is going to hit 100 yards receiving, he won't get the extra 3 points. So we have to keep that in mind when we look at these projections and compare them to PrizePicks. But nevertheless, let's take a look here. So Stefan Diggs, 18.23 fantasy points. PrizePicks has him at 19 at the moment. I think betting the under here against Miami. We could take a look if we drop over to the DraftKings Sportsbook here. We've got Miami and Buffalo. It looks like Buffalo is just a 3.5 point home favorite, which seems kind of low with the way that Buffalo's been playing lately. Honestly, I was expecting that number to be a bit higher, so kind of surprising that it's not. But if we click over here, I use Pro Football Reference. I like to take a look at the DVP averages here. So if we sort by, we'll use DraftKings fantasy points per game for DraftKings as a way to look at how well Miami has defended against receivers. So we go down to Miami. There they are. 37.5 points allowed per game to opposing receivers. I mean, that's a lot. That puts them in the as far as average, below average at defending opposing wide receivers. So at 37.5, almost 37.5 points, a little over. Stefan Diggs at 19. Ooh. And then, the projection of 18. I think I would take the over here. I think Diggs has a good chance of going over here. So I'm going to say that Roto Grinders, I'm going to go against the grain. I'm going to say Stefan Diggs goes over his PrizePicks projection of 19 points. The next guy we'll take a look at is Nick Chubb. Chubb, he's projected for 17 points. Let's take a look and see. They're going against Pittsburgh this week. This is a tough matchup for Nick Chubb. Obviously, with him and Kareem Hunt, they split the carries, they split the touches in the backfield for Cleveland. Pittsburgh, one of the best in the league against opposing running backs, allowing just 18.7 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. This is a tough matchup. They've already met once, the Browns and Steelers, earlier this season. Unfortunately, we don't have any data for Chubb and how he performed because he was out with an injury. If we look at the spread here, it looks like Cleveland is a 9.5 point home favorite. Pretty big, actually. I think that's a pretty big spread, maybe a little bit too big. I think Pittsburgh and Cleveland, this should be a lot more competitive game than what Vegas thinks it's going to be. I mean, 9.5 points, that's pretty big. If we go and look at some of the other spreads, 12.5, I mean, 9.5, I mean, these are huge spreads here. So 9.5, I mean, they're expecting Pittsburgh to just be trailing and being beaten handily throughout the game. I don't know if I agree with that. So yeah, they're allowing 18.7 DraftKings points per game. Chubb is projected for 17 points per game. Let's go over to Roto Grinders. Let's get an idea of what they think Nick Chubb might score. We'll sort that. We'll go down to Chubb. They got him at 15.71. I think I actually agree with that. I think 15.71, the under in this case of his PrizePicks projection of 17. I think 15.71 sounds more like it to me. I have a hard time seeing him getting to 17. So I'm taking the under on Chubb, and we'll see how that works out. Next guy up, Calvin Ridley. Ridley, 19, going against Tampa Bay. This is a tough matchup. Tampa Bay's defense, at least their front seven, I mean, are some of the best in the league. You talk about their defensive line and linebacking core. They're going to put a lot of pressure on Matt Ryan, just as they did a couple of weeks ago when they met. Their secondary, Tampa Bay's secondary, is beatable. That's definitely a thing that's working in Calvin Ridley and the Atlanta Falcons' favor, is that the Bucs can be beaten through the air. They have been beaten through the air over and over again throughout this season. So Let's take a look at some of the numbers here. We'll go over to wide receivers. We'll sort DraftKings, Tampa Bay Bucks. So there you go. I mean, as good as their front seven has been, they're allowing 39.9 DraftKings points to opposing wide receivers. So almost 40. And there's only a handful of teams here that are allowing 40 or more fantasy points to opposing receivers. So I look at something like that and I say, hey, there's tons of upside here for Calvin Ridley. Go over here and we'll take a look at the spread. They have the Bucks as 7-point favorites at home. I like that. I think the Bucks are finally starting to look like they're hitting their stride here. So I don't mind that. Yeah, the 19. Let's go over to Roto Grinders and take a look. Calvin Ridley, they've got him at 17.21 fantasy points here. I don't mind that. They got Atlanta scoring 21.5 points, implied team total for this player's team. So, I mean, is there a chance Calvin Ridley finds the end zone? Sure, I like that. I mean, I think that there's a good chance for that. But, yeah, I mean, this is a winnable matchup for Ridley. 19, let's take a look and see what he's been averaging here over the last few games. Take a look at some of his game logs. Scroll over here, we see that obviously he's a touchdown target, touchdown magnet. And these 100-point or 100-yard games that he has here, you have to take 3 points off of those. Remember that. So instead of 17.3, this would be 14.3. You know, this would be 29.3. This would be 23.4. This would be 12.8. So the numbers are a little inflated over his last few games due to those 100-yard 3-point milestones that he's been getting. So if you take, 14, 29, 23, 12, I mean, the last time they played Tampa Bay, he put up 32.3. So, does he see the 14 targets, 10 receptions, 163 yards, and a touchdown again? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, that's a big total to repeat, and I'm gonna say that he doesn't quite get there. Not that big of a game. 17 feels a little light. I mean, that's a close one for me. I'd probably say for Calvin Ridley's 19 PrizePicks points, under. I take the under. I think he's somewhere between 17 and 19, but I'm going to go with the under there. Let's move on to the next one. Mike Evans, same game, Tampa Bay and Atlanta. As we talked about, spread is favoring the Bucks here, 7-point home favorites. We know what the Bucks are giving up to opposing receivers, but how about Atlanta? Well, they're one of the worst teams in the league. 44.7 DraftKings points per game allowed to opposing receivers. So let's go over here. Let's find Mike Evans. See what he's done here recently. I know he had a huge game last week. Yep. Broke 40 points. So if we take 3 away from that, that's 37 points. Okay, then versus Atlanta 2 weeks ago. This will be a rematch for him, as we talked about. He had 7 targets. He hauled in 6 of them for 110 yards for 17 points. We take 3 away from that. That's 14. 14 PrizePicks points. They've got it projected for 15. I'm going to take the under again. I think Mike Evans, great player, great matchup. I'm going to take the under. I think it's somebody else's day to eat. So that's how I'm sitting on Mike Evans. Ezekiel Elliott, another guy that's been a disappointment. If you drafted him in your season log fantasy leagues, he's been underwhelming, along with the likes of Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey. The list goes on and on as far as those guys that were taken in the first round that have underperformed. Michael Thomas, another guy you can throw on that list. Ezekiel Elliott, 14.2 points. He's going against the Giants this week. Let's see what the Giants are allowing to opposing running backs. They've actually been a sneaky good defense this year. Here we go. Just over 25 fantasy points per game using DraftKings scoring to opposing running backs. Let's go take a look at the spread here. Game total and spread. Oh, man. Where are they at? Okay. I don't see him up here. Why is that? Okay. Dallas is not on here. DraftKings. Boom. Wow, this is pretty much looking like a pick'em type of matchup here. Dallas at New York Giants. Let's head over to the running backs. All right, they got Zeke at 14.81. So PrizePicks, they have him at 14.2. Roto Grinders, 14.81. I mean, slight margin difference there. They're pretty much dead on as far as the picks. This would probably be a situation where I would fade. I wouldn't try to figure out an over or under here unless you're just a roll of the dice, coin flip type of person. I'd probably stay away from this one. It's 14.81 and 14.2. I mean, they're pretty much on the button with their projections. So we'll call Zeke a fade. Let's move on to Justin Jefferson, one of my favorite picks for Rookie of the Year considerations. He's facing off against Detroit this week. We know Detroit has been awful against opposing receivers. If we go take a look at how many points they're allowing to opposing receivers, 45.4. That is the second worst margin of fantasy points per game allowed to opposing receivers. 45.4 fantasy points per game allowed to opposing receivers. So huge opportunity here for Justin Jefferson. We'll head over to DraftKings and take a look at what he's done lately and what he's projected for this week. They've got him at 16.13. So that would be under PrizePicks for 17.5. Let's see. So 14.5 points against New Orleans. 18.4 versus Chicago. We got to take 3 off of that because he did break 100 yards. So that's actually 15.4 points. You got 9.9 versus Tampa Bay. Let's see his first matchup against Detroit. Just 9.4, surprisingly. Only had 4 targets that game. 3 catches for 64 yards. That's light. 9.4 is light. I think he can definitely go over 9.4, but going under 7 or over 17.5 seems unrealistic. I think I like where Roto Grinders is on his projection here at 16.13. I like the under. Let's go under Justin Jefferson. Who else we got? Chris Godwin. We got Myles Gaskin. Let's go Mark Andrews. We haven't talked about any tight ends. 13.5 fantasy points for Mark Andrews on PrizePicks. Let's take a look here. Go to tight end. Go to DraftKings points allowed per game. They're facing off against Cincinnati. Cincinnati, one of the worst teams in the league at defending against the tight end position, allowing just over 15 fantasy points per game to tight ends. Let's head over here to take a look at the spread. Okay. Okay, there we go. God, I was about to say, this is another Dallas Cowboys situation here. I can't seem to find them, but Baltimore, huge favorites on the road. 12.5-point favorites. Cincinnati, terrible season for them. No surprise that they're huge underdogs in this matchup. So 13.5 points for Andrews. Let's go ahead and flip over here to tight ends. Roto Grinders has him at 13.37 fantasy points. Let's pull up his game log, see what we've got here for him. The last time he faced Cincinnati, torched him. 17.6 fantasy points. Did not go over 100 yards, so 17.6 is what he would have scored on PrizePicks. Had 9 targets, secured 6 of them for 56 yards and a touchdown. I like that. 17.6. Great matchup for him. 13.5. I'm taking the over. I think he finds the end zone here. If he does, that's a quick 6 points. And then he just needs a few catches for, 40, 50 yards. And he's over. So, I think that's totally doable. 13.5, I'll go over on Mark Andrews. Who else do we have here? Gio Bernard. Here we go. Davante Adams, 23.5 points. That's a huge number. Huge number for Davante Adams. Let's take a look. We sort. We get DraftKings points allowed. 23.5 versus Chicago. Let's go to the Bears. They've been one of the better teams defensively in the league. They're allowing just 33.4. It sounds like a lot of points, but if you look at where they rank, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th. Okay, so they're the 7th toughest against wide receivers in the NFL. Let's go over here and take a look at what the game total and the spread is. There we go. Green Bay at Chicago. Looks like Green Bay is a 5-point road favorite. 50.5 points. Anytime I see 50 or more, it gets my attention for DFS purposes. That usually means there's going to be quite a few points scored. So let's head over to DraftKings. Filter just wide receivers. Of course, Davante Adams. Top of the charts, and why shouldn't he be? He's had a great season, him and Aaron Rodgers. Dominant. I am a little worried. They did lose their all-pro left tackle to a season-ending knee injury. Going against the Chicago Bears defensive line, not having your starting left tackle protecting your blind side, that could create problems this week. This will be a good primer, a good test for Green Bay not having Bakhtiari in there to protect Aaron Rodgers. So we'll see how they do against the formidable pass rush of the Chicago Bears. But anyway, back to Adams here, 18.6. Quite a bit under PrizePicks projection of 23.5 points. Now, typically when I see a margin like that, 23.5 versus 18.66, I get pretty excited. But let's dig in a little deeper. Let's go down and find his game log versus Chicago. His first matchup versus Chicago, he had 18.1 fantasy points, did not go over 100 yards, so we don't need to factor in that 3-point bonus here. He had 9 targets, Caught 6 of them, 61 yards and a touchdown. I mean, like, his recent games have just been ridiculous. 43.2, so 40.2, 24.5, so 21.5, 34.1, so 31.1. I mean, the guy's just been crushing. Look at the targets. 12, 10, 12, 12, 12, 12. If we can get him more targets, he had 9 here, right? If we can get him up there in the double digits in the 12 range instead of 9, he eats. I mean, he's going to eat anyway. Look, I mean, he did had 18.1 points on 9 targets, 6 receptions. 23.5. Not out of the realm of possibilities here. He's been so hot. Ugh. He's just been on fire. I'm going to take the over. I do worry about the left tackle, though, so if you think that's a concern, if you think that's a problem for Rodgers in this offense, maybe take the under. Take the under if you think that, missing Bakhtiari is going to affect Rodgers in this passing game that much. I could see you taking the under here, but they got Green Bay scoring 27.75 points. You're telling me that Davante Adams doesn't see 1-2 touchdowns? We've seen him, last week just taking 3 touchdowns, right? Like it was nothing in the snow, in the cold. Weather's not a factor here for Aaron Rodgers. We know he likes playing in the cold. Not worried about anything like that. Yeah, I think 18.66. I think that's too low. Yeah, I'm going to take the over. Final answer, over Davante Adams. Who else we got here? Derrick Henry, King Henry. Let's take a look at his matchup. He's got a juicy one this week against Houston. They got him set at 25 PrizePicks points right now. Not enough, in my opinion. I think he absolutely smashes. He had a down week last week against Green Bay. I thought that was a great matchup for him. Unfortunately, he couldn't take advantage of that. Probably lost some people some big games in the fantasy playoffs. But this is a perfect bounce back opportunity for him. It's a divisional matchup against Houston. They're giving up 33.2 DraftKings points per game to opposing running backs. I think he gets it done. I think he smashes them. And I believe he smashed them the last time they played. Let's take a look at the game logs, though, just to be sure. We go find Houston. Crushed them. Right? 40.4 DraftKings points. Guy went over 200 yards against Houston. I don't think he does 200 yards again. I think he goes well over 100 yards, though. I think he finds the end zone at least once. Maybe the 2 touchdowns doesn't happen again. Maybe the 52 receiving yards, which is a complete outlier for a guy like Henry. He's not really involved in the passing game like that. But, 52 yards receiving, 212 yards, 264 total yards from scrimmage, 2 touchdowns. This was just a drumming for Derrick Henry. I don't think he matches these totals, but I do think he has an incredible game. And, 100-plus yards and a couple of touchdowns is not out of the realm of possibility either for this guy. So 25 points, I'm taking the over. I'm going over. I think Roto Grinders at their 22, I think they're a little light on this guy. Tennessee's implied to score 31.75 points. I expect Henry to have 6, maybe even 12 of those points. Maybe even more. This is a team you can run against. Houston's terrible against running backs, right? I'm taking the over on Henry. I think that's a safe bet. Montgomery, let's take a look at him. This guy's been incredible too. He's been on fire lately. The Bears looked abysmal in their run game to start the season. Montgomery. I know he was dealing with an injury early on in the season, but he came on pretty strong there at the end of the regular season, and I think that this could be another situation where he eats. Green Bay hasn't been great against the run. Let's just see how bad they've been. They're allowing almost 28 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs, so one of the worst in the league. I mean, that puts him at fifth worst, or fifth friendliest for running backs, however you want to look at that. Go back here and take a look at the total, 50.5, as we talked about. Green Bay is only just, they're just a 5-point favorite. This isn't a situation where I think, Montgomery gets game scripted out. I don't think that they, according to what I'm seeing here, should be trailing by a ton of points where they have to abandon the run or anything like that. So 18 points. Let's take a look a little bit, at the numbers here, and they've got them down here at 13. I mean, 18, 13, that's a huge gap. That's almost 5 points. I think he scores more than 13 points. I don't think 13.73 is doing him justice. His last game against Green Bay, I mean, the guy put up 25.3. We take away the bonus. That's still 22.3 PrizePicks points. And he did it on just 11 carries. Now, we look at his last couple of games here. He's had a lot more than 11 carries. He's got 32 against Minnesota, 23 against Jacksonville. If Chicago can keep this game close with Green Bay, I think that he should see, 20-ish plus, carries. Not real super involved as far as receptions. He's got a couple of games here where he really popped off 40 yards, almost 40 here, 42 there. I mean, that's just the cherry on top, the icing on the cake for a guy like Montgomery. Montgomery's typically going to be a guy who earns his living on the ground and not so much through the air in the passing game. So 18, I'm going to take the under. Green Bay actually did look good last week against Derrick Henry. I'm going to take the under here. It's going to be close, though. It's going to be close. It's not going to be 13. I'll be surprised if he scores 13, 14 fantasy points against Green Bay. I have it somewhere between that 14 and, 17 range. Sounds probably right to me. But, yeah, I don't think he matches what he did against him the first go around. Unless they keep it close, and unless they feed him a bunch of carries. So if you think that Chicago hangs around in this game and they can keep pounding the rock with Montgomery, which they've been, doing a lot of lately, taking the under here, or rather taking the over, if you think that it stays close and they feed him a bunch of carries, taking the over here can make a lot of sense too. But Green Bay's been on fire, man. If they run away with this game early, if they get a big lead early, Montgomery's going to be phased out. So that's just some things to think about. Who else do we have that's interesting here? How about another tight end? Let's look at Darren Waller. Waller's facing the Denver Broncos. Denver, pretty good defense this year for the most part. How are they doing against tight ends? That's a good question. Pretty good. They are, I would say, above average versus tight ends this year, allowing 11.9, almost 12 DraftKings points to the position. Let's take a look and see. Got a 51-point total. Vegas as 3-point road favorites. So again, 17 points for Waller. Let's take a look and see what Roto Grinders has him projected for. He's currently projected as their second highest scoring tight end, 15.3 points. But I mean, look at the guy's ceiling. You know, we know he's got tremendous upside, 29, 30 point upside on any given week. Raiders are projected to score 27 points as a team. Let's dig in here to Waller's game logs and see if we can find out a little bit more. Over his last few, he's got 16.2. We take 3 away for the 100-yard bonus. That's 13.2. He's got 30 here. We take the 3 away. It's 27. 14.5. 45. We take that down to 42. I mean, he's just been crushing. He's been crushing it, right? So 17 points. Based on these game logs, very easy for him to do. We know he's basically their top receiver. They don't really have any wide receivers that are outshining him. He's their number one receiver. Kind of like, you know, arguably like Travis Kelce for the Chiefs, or like a George Kittle when he's healthy for the 49ers. You know, even though he's a tight end, he's leading this team most weeks in receiving yards and touchdowns. And so let's go down, and their last game against Denver back in November, 5 targets, secured 3 of them, 37 yards for only 6.7 points. Definitely a down game for Waller, definitely a below average game for a guy like Darren Waller. You know, since that game, I mean, he's been on a tear. You throw out his game here against Atlanta. I mean, the guy 21.8, 45, 14, 30, 16. Okay, so they got him at 17. Roto Grinders has him at 15. I'm gonna give my stamp, my seal of approval to the over. I think he goes over this 17 number here this week. Denver, you know, not the easiest matchup. Definitely not the toughest matchup either. I mean, we've seen the guy, Darren Waller, overcome much harder matchups than this and just absolutely smash. So, divisional game, rivalry game. I like Darren Waller for the over here. I mean, the upside's just there. He's got some duds in his game logs. We've seen it. But this is one where I think that he absolutely could smash that 17. I mean, 27 implied points for the Raiders. Yeah, I think Waller gets at least 1, maybe even 2 touchdowns here. I'm going to take the over on Waller. Got a couple more names here on the board. Some interesting ones. Let's take a look at Alvin Kamara versus Carolina. Carolina this season's been really bad against running backs. They've been one of the most fantasy-friendly defenses against running backs this year. Let's take a look. Carolina, boom. One of the top 10 worst in the league against opposing running backs, allowing nearly 27 fantasy points per game. 47.5 points implied total. Saints are 6.5 point road favorites. Kamara projected for 23. What do our friends at Roto Grinders think about that figure? They got him at 20.5. Let's call it 20.5 points, which would be the under for you guys keeping score at home. We go down to Carolina here. Last time they met, back in October, 14 carries, 83 yards, 8 targets. Got to love that about Kamara. He's very involved in the passing game most weeks. Secured all 8 of those targets for 65 yards. That put him at 22.8. 22.8. If you remember, 23, 22.8 last time he met these guys, these Carolina Panthers. 22.8 is a good day, but it's not good enough to go over. Let's take a look at his last few games. I mean, unless you were living under a rock, you probably heard that Alvin Kamara won a lot of people their fantasy football leagues with this huge performance here. 22 carries, 155 yards, six rushing touchdowns. And also had 3 receptions for 17 yards on top. So a huge 56.2. We take away the 3, obviously, for 53 fantasy points per game. There's no way in the world he does that again. Look, I love Alvin Kamara. I think he's one of the best running backs, maybe the best running back all around. You know, passing, running, most complete running backs in the league. Him, Christian McCaffrey. He's not putting up another 6-touchdown game. There's going to be a lot of people that probably take the over because of recency bias. They're still trying to get back on track, the Saints, with Drew Brees back under center. I think that had a lot to do with his output, Kamara's output last game. 23 points. Let's get right to it. I mean, I'm taking the under here. It's going to be close, though. It's going to be close. 23, right? They've got him projected for 20.5. This is a great matchup for him. I like the under. What do you guys think, though? Maybe I'm wrong. You know, I could be wrong on a lot of these. NFL's been crazy. NFL and PrizePicks have been crazy. Let's do one more. DeAndre Hopkins versus the Rams. Tough matchup. We know the Rams, they have had one of the better defenses in the league this season. They present a lot of problems up front. They present a lot of problems in the secondary. So let's take a look and go over to wide receivers. Let's see what the Rams are giving up per game here. Yeah, if you hear that in the background, that's my dog, my beagle, Bentley. His name's Bentley. Rams, the number 1 toughest team against opposing wide receivers. Not a good sign. Not a good start for Hopkins. Let's find that game here. Yep, 40.5 points. Cardinals and Rams. Looks like the Cardinals are 3.5 point favorites right now on the road in LA. Go over to the wide receiver position. Let's take a look and see what Roto Grinders has here. They got Hopkins for 17.3. So that would put him under the PrizePicks projections. Let's take a look at his game logs. Over his last 3 games, last 4 games, he's had some pretty good numbers here. 12.8. 31 minus the 3 brings him down to 28. We'll call that 19.6, 19.2. Okay, so over his last 4, I mean, he's probably averaging more than his projection of 17 this week. Was it 17? I'm sorry, 19 and a half. Let's go down to his last matchup against LA, which was back December 6th, not that long ago. He had 13 targets, 8 receptions for 52 yards and a touchdown, which put him at 19.2 points. I'm taking the under. I agree with Roto Grinders on this one. I think that 17.3, that's a realistic number for Hopkins. I don't think he reaches his target, so I'm going to go under. Anyone else worth looking at here? I know I said that was going to be the last one, but kind of skipped over a lot of these guys. All right, let's look at Eckler. Eckler, he is facing Kansas City this week. Kansas City, pretty good defense most weeks. Here's how they fare against opposing running backs. Not great against the run. 25.1 DraftKings points, which again is the closest thing we have to PrizePicks points as far as their scoring system. So that is why we look at that number. Go over to the spread here. Well, it's got an implied total of 44, which is kind of low. Kind of a low implied total, but it looks like the Chargers are 3.5 point favorites, and I'm sure that has a lot to do with Pat Mahomes sitting. Vegas is projecting this game to be a bit closer than it would be otherwise. What did Eckler do in his first meeting against Kansas City? Let's take a look. Austin Eckler, first of all, they have him at 18.1 points, which would be over his 17 on PrizePicks. He's been up or down, though. He's been up or down recently. I mean, I wish the guy was a little bit more reliable. He's very unpredictable, very volatile. I mean, they don't feed him a ton of carries, 10, 13, 15, 8, 14. He doesn't get a ton of yards on the ground. He typically is pretty good through the passing game, but even that's been pretty down for the last couple weeks. 67 here, you got 85 here against Buffalo a few weeks back. Yeah, so Eckler, 15, 11, 23, 10, he's only went over 20 two times in his last 6 games. So you kind of just never know what you're going to get from the guy. I wish it was different. It was different last year. Last year he was a beast when he was healthy. I mean, he was like Christian McCaffrey light. His last matchup back in September against Kansas City, 16 attempts, 93 yards, 4 targets, 4 receptions, 55 yards receiving. Ended up with 18.8 PrizePicks points. Projected for 18.11 this week. 17. I mean, this. God, I don't trust him. I don't trust him. I'll be frank with you. I think I took him last week and he burned me. I had him over, and he went under, way under in a prime matchup. I mean, a spot that I thought he would smash in against Denver here. He ended up with 15.8. I forget what he was projected for on PrizePicks last week, but yeah, disappointment. And that's been the case lately. He has a couple of these outlier games where he just goes off. And a lot of that has to do with his involvement in the passing game. You see, 16 targets, 9 targets, 11 receptions here, 9 receptions here. If he gets involved in the passing game, then yeah, I think he can go over 17, but I don't trust it. So I'm taking the under, but yeah, that's going to do it. That's going to do it for the skill position players. We could take a look at a couple of quarterbacks before we wrap up here. Tom Brady and the Bucs, 21.8 points versus Atlanta. This is a game that they want to win. If they win this, then they secure the 5 seed in the playoffs, and that would put them against whoever the winner of the albatross that is the NFC East. Whoever wins the NFC East, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would have a soft matchup, we'll say, in their wild card playoff game. So this is a game that Brady and the Bucs should be completely motivated to come in and win. Atlanta, again, terrible defense for the most part. Number one friendliest defense in the league against opposing quarterbacks, averaging 25.5 points allowed to the position. Go over to DraftKings. Falcons and Bucks. Talked about this earlier. Bucks, 7-point home favorites. 50 points is the implied total. 21.8 for the GOAT. The GOAT, Tom Brady. Go over to Roto Grinders. Where do they have Brady this week? They would have him at just slightly under 20 fantasy points, which would put him under his projection. Bucks are implied to score 28.5 points. They just played Atlanta a couple weeks ago. Let's take a look at how he's done recently. 29.92, take away the 3, so 26.92. 23.4, we take the 3 away there, that's 20.4. So 20.4 against Atlanta in his last meeting. That would put him over. Oh, excuse me. I'd put him under. That would put him under 21.8. I think they come out and just torch the Falcons at home in Tampa Bay. I mean, I could see them just coming out and just ripping them. Complete domination here. I think the Bucks are looking really good offensively. They're hitting their stride, and they're doing it at the right time. This is when you want to start heating up, when you want to start to gel as a team. I like the over here on Tom Brady, 21.8. I think he can skate by 21.8 pretty easily this week. What else? Josh Allen, 21. Another guy who's been on fire at the right time. He's got Miami this week. Miami, surprisingly, one of the better teams against opposing quarterbacks. 19.1 points per game allowed to opposing quarterbacks. 42.5 point total. Buffalo, 3.5 point home favorites. Allen, 21. Roto Grinders has him at 22.74 implied fantasy points. Let's take a look at some of his recent games. Maybe he crushes like he did last week against New England. I mean, just destroyed them. 320 yards, 4 touchdowns. Tacked on another 35 yards on the ground. So you take that 3 points away, and he's at 29.3 here. 19 here. 28.1 here. I mean, just been as good as you can ask for from a quarterback recently. His first meeting against Miami all the way back in September. Domination. 417 yards through the air, 4 passing touchdowns. Little bonus, 18 yards rushing, 34.48 fantasy points. We're going to take the 3 away, of course, because you don't get that on PrizePicks. You do not get passing milestone bonus for yardage on PrizePicks. You don't get it for rushing or receiving either. So, that would put him at 31.48. He'd crush 21. And I think he does. I think he does crush 21. Roto Grinders, I agree with you. 22.74. That would put him over. I agree. He goes over 21 this week. I'm not betting against Josh Allen anymore. I've done it. It's cost me some bucks. Not doing it this week against Miami. Over on Josh Allen. Whew. Mason Rudolph, Sam Darnold, Andy Dalton, Daniel Jones, Brandon Allen. It's like Scrubs Row here. Scrubs Row. Let's go Aaron Rodgers. We talked a little bit about his number 1 receiver, Davante Adams, and we like Adams, so we should like Rodgers, right? Right. Let's see. He's got a tough matchup again versus Chicago. They're one of the best teams in the league defensively against quarterbacks. 17.8. Fifth toughest against quarterbacks. Rodgers projected for 23. 50.5 implied total. Green Bay. 5-point road favorites. Aaron Rodgers, 21.74 fantasy points according to Roto Grinders this week. I'd put him under 23. Let's take a look at his recent game logs. I mean, this guy's an MVP candidate. We know Aaron Rodgers has been dominant all year. We know that he's, arguably the best quarterback in the league. You can make a case for Pat Mahomes. I mean, it's probably those two guys, two top quarterbacks in the league this year. 26.4, 30.9, 23.5. And this is without a 3-point bonus. He's putting up these kind of numbers. 23 or better in his last 3 games. His last meeting against Chicago. 211 yards and 4 touchdowns. Good for 25.64 fantasy points. I'm not betting against this guy either. I did that the other night. I thought, it's the snow, it's the wind, Tennessee, I'm taking the under. Cost me some bucks. Taking the over on Aaron Rodgers. Who else we got? Deshaun Watson, 24. Let's take a peek here. Going against Tennessee. Talked about how Rodgers just lit Tennessee up in the snow last week. Can they do it again? Can they allow somebody else to just light them up? 22.9 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. That's good for fifth worst. Tennessee is negative minus 7.5 point road favorites. 56, huge implied total here. Love to see that for Deshaun Watson. 56. So let's take a look. Just a reminder, 24 is the number. They got Watson going for 23.63. Close. That's so close to 24, but it's not 24. It's slightly under 24. They're projected to score 24.25 points. Quick glimpse into the game logs for Mr. Watson. 24.76. 21.42. 16.56. Okay. 23. Looking a little sketch, looking a little tough. Last meeting against Tennessee back in October. 28 for 37, 335 yards, 4 touchdowns. Had 4 rushing attempts for another 26 yards. Put him at 32 minus the 3 because of the bonus that you don't get on PrizePicks. 29. 29 was his total against Tennessee the last time they met. 23.63. He needs 24. Do we think he gets there? What do you think? I think he gets there. I'm taking the over here. This guy's got 33 point upside. I mean, that's his ceiling. I think 24 or more is well in the realm of possibilities here. Scrub. Is there anybody else worth talking about here? This guy. Lamar Jackson against Cincinnati. Cincinnati, 19.4 fantasy points per game allowed to quarterbacks. Ravens and Bengals, 44-point total. We talked about the Ravens being huge road favorites. Lamar Jackson, they've got him at 22.64 projected points on Roto Grinders. Ravens are projected to score 28.25 points as a team. Let's take a peek at the game logs. .92, but he did go over 100 rushing yards, so we take the 3 away from that. Still, over 30 fantasy points here. Over 30 fantasy points here. Here he had 28. We got to take 3 away again. 25 fantasy points here. 27 fantasy points here. All right, and now let's go look at his first meeting against Cincinnati. All the way back early October. 180 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick. Didn't do much on the ground. Didn't run at all. Very unlike Mr. Jackson. I mean, if you look at the rest of his rushing totals here, this guy had 3 yards. 3 yards. I think I go 3 yards and I roll around in this chair I'm sitting in. So that's to put that in perspective. Not a very good game for Lamar Jackson as far as rushing goes. He ended up with 14.5 points. I think he goes well over that this game. I don't think 14.5 is anywhere near what he finishes with. 25, 22.64. I don't think he gets there, though. I think he has a much better game than the first game against Cincinnati, but I don't think he reaches 25. I'm taking the under. The under 25 on Lamar Jackson. But that's going to wrap it up. I hope you enjoyed. This is my first time making one of these types of videos. I hope to be doing more of these types of videos for you in the future. If you have time, leave a comment below. Let me know what you think, what you liked, what you didn't like. Any feedback is good feedback. I appreciate it all. I also appreciate you guys subscribing, liking, sharing. Turn on a notification if you want to know when these videos post. I'm going to try and get as many as I can out for not only NFL, but NBA. NFL season obviously is coming to a close. I'd like to get more of this stuff out for NBA, big NBA fans. So be on the lookout for that and much, much more in 2021. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.